Hi guys, it's Mrs. Smith. I am going to give you an instructional video on how to make a World War I pop-out book. This is product number 4. Technically, it is an individual product, meaning that every kid has to do one in their journal, and your group gets your 15 tokens once everyone's got their pop-out book done. So let's start with the direction. Design a pop-out informational book about World War I. Cut 2 blank sheets of computer paper into a 4-square. Fold those quarter sheets in half and glue them down in your journal. So we're going to take, each kid gets 2 blank sheets of paper. We're going to take those 2 blank sheets of paper. First we're going to fold this way. Then we're going to fold this way. And we're going to make it into a 4-square. Once you've got your 4-square, 1, 2, 3, 4, take your scissors and cut them out, and you end up with 8 different squares. Each one of those 8 different squares needs to be creased, and this is how we make our pop-out book. Once you've got 8 different squares, we're just going to crease them all, and each one of them becomes something that you glue into your journal. You'll need to have pens or pencils, and in order to do this in your journal, you'll also need to have the World War I fill-in-the-blank notes. So, back to the directions. Cut 2 blank sheets of computer paper into a 4-square. Fold those quarter sheets in half and glue them into your journal. The outside of the card, this is one of the cards, the outside of the card has the title in bold print letters with a fully colored picture. The inside of the card has 2 complete describing sentences. So, let me show you the example Mrs. Smith has been working on. First of all, here's my example journal. And I've got my fill-in-the-blank notes 1 page before. Here's what your pop-out book is going to look like. Again, each one of these pieces of paper is going to have a title and a picture on the outside, and then your important information goes on the inside. So maybe we're sitting with our glue and our pens and pencils. Oh, let me go back once. These are example pictures. There's 4 pages right here, and Mrs. Smith printed them all out in color. I'm gonna hang these up in the classroom, so take a break from your video and look up in the classroom, maybe on the bulletin board or maybe on the whiteboard, and look for these examples of the pictures so that when it comes time for you to color the pictures on the outside, you can look at the examples. So here's what we do. These are the titles for your card on the pop-out book. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And over here, you have 8 of these pieces of paper. The first thing you'll want to do is probably glue them down and number them up in the corner. Then what we have to do is give them big titles. How World War I began. How World War I began. Number 2, Allied and Central Powers, Allied and Central Powers. Now, Mrs. Smith did the easy way out where I cut and pasted these, but what you'll be doing is looking at the examples and just drawing your best version of whatever it is. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to make sure that we've got some sort of visual on the outside. All right. The inside of the card has 2 complete describing sentences for the information listed on the outside. So where do I find the information for the inside? You go back to the World War I fill-in-the-blank notes. Now, I have the one that's completely blank, but if you look back one page in my Geo Journal, here's where I've got it. So if I look at what information needs to go on the inside of how World War I began, we come over here and we see this entire paragraph at the top is how World War I began. So I say, in 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand from Austria-Hungary was killed by a Serbian man named Gavrilo Princip. So that would be my first piece of information. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and Russia helped its alliance, Serbia, and soon the whole continent was at war. So that's my second piece of information. So I would say Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and then I would say Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. So if I'm looking for, like the directions say, 2 describing sentences to go on the inside of how World War I began, again, I'm probably just going to go straight back to the notes that I filled the blanks in right here, and I'm probably going to figure out Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and that's my first piece of information. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and that's my second piece of information. So I would write it here, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. And so that's my first sentence. And then I would say Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. So as Mrs. Smith goes to grade your pop-out book, I will look at the title and the picture on the outside, and then I'll open it up and I'll read and I'll say, oh yes, this student understands. How World War I began is that Franz Ferdinand got assassinated and Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Cool, they know what they're talking about. Going on to number 2, I won't do all of these for you, but I'll probably do number 1 and 2. Where do we find the information to go on the inside of our pop-out book? Well, we just turn back to World War I fill-in-the-blanks. So this one says Allied and Central Powers. That means Allied powers were fighting against Central Powers. So let's try and figure out who fought on what side. According to this chart, the Central Powers were Austria-Hungary, Germany, Turkey, and Bulgaria. And the Allies were Russia, France, Great Britain, and eventually the USA joined. So in order to turn that into 2 sentences, I would write, the Allies were, and now I'm going to make my list, and I'd say the Central Powers were, and then I would make out my list. So I go back to my notes and I say, who's on what side? Let's see. Allied powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Turkey, Bulgaria, and I'd list them out right here. Austria-Hungary, Turkey, Germany, Bulgaria. Central powers. Oh, I just got it backwards. The Allies were Russia, France, Great Britain. So I would write Russia, France, Great Britain. Same thing for Central Powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Turkey, Bulgaria. Turkey, Bulgaria, and which one? Austria-Hungary, oh, and Germany, how could I forget? And up here we want to say plus USA in 1917. Okay, so straightforward directions. The World War I pop-out book. We start with computer paper, we fold the sheets in half, we glue them in, We write titles on the outside. We draw very simple sketch pictures on the outside, and then we put our information out of the fill-in-the-blank notes on the inside. The one thing that I haven't done yet is I haven't shown you that over in trench warfare, which trench warfare was pretty nasty business. Let me read it to you real quick. Men dug trenches, which are like basically big human-sized pits, and fired guns at each other. The trenches were wide enough for 2 men to walk upright. No man's land was the space between the trenches. It was choked with rats, lice, and mire. Mire means swampy mud. So basically, trench warfare was just nasty business. The Allied trench would be a huge hole where you could stand up on one side, and then there was all this barbed wire and bomb craters and ugly business that was called no man's land. And on the other side were the Central Powers. And occasionally someone from this side would get brave enough to pop up and try and point and shoot their guns over to the Allies. Or occasionally the Allies would try and charge no man lands, but they'd just get, taken out by the Central Powers. So trench warfare was pretty nasty business. I feel like the reason that I needed to show and explain to you about trench warfare in World War I is that, remember on all of these example pictures that I showed you about weapons and the picture of the assassination of Archduke and the outline of Europe, over here on this piece of paper where it says number 4, trench warfare, it says use Mrs. Smith's example. You should be able to draw this by hand. So I wanted to make sure that you could see an example of how I've drawn trench warfare for number 4. And then once more, just so that we're very clear, when I'm writing about trench warfare, and I open up the number 4 flap to go write my 2 sentences right here, I just come right back here and I read the 2 sentences in the fill in the blank, and then I transfer that information into 2 sentences on the inside. So a completed pop-out book would look something like this. Again, 2 sentences per each inside flap. Remember, glue and scissors are in the top drawer. I will have a whole bunch of blank computer paper on my desk so that you can grab the 2 pieces for when you're ready to cut. I will have these papers about examples of pictures. I'll have them put up in the classroom so that you can get good examples of what to draw. Your groups should have the directions right here, which tells you all of the titles. Plus, if you need to pause the video at any point, you could pause the video on this screenshot so that you can see exactly how your titles and pictures should look, and then go through and write 2 sentences per inside. Ask the teacher if you need any help. I'd be so happy to assist, but I wanted to make sure you had an easy day working on a World War I pop-out book.